Hi guys, I'm back again today with another video. I know it's been a while. I've been up and about and busy here and there. No time to video or upload. For the next 3 weeks, we will be stable in terms of uploads, but afterwards, it's gonna be a whole messy situation, probably until New Year's. So click the bell button. It will save you from coming to the channel every time to check. It will just notify you if I upload. Because even I don't know what my schedule looks like. It's crazy, especially it's the end of the year. So things are just gonna like chaotic and messy. But anyways, today we're checking out 10 things that are normal in the Netherlands but are luxuries in America. I want to know and I want to also compare if it is a luxury in the Philippines. So before we do start, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and let's find out.
Today, I wanted to talk to you about some things that seem so normal here, but in America, they would be considered downright luxuries. This is a long list with a
Is it?
wide variety of things, so let's get into it. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is the supermarket situation here in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, basically every neighborhood in a city or in a town, you will find a
Oh.
supermarket that is pretty accessible. In the US, that is not a given. If you live in a neighborhood with a supermarket nearby, then that is considered a luxury. That is a perk
Hmm.
of the neighborhood. Because of this, in the US, for instance, I didn't know anyone who went grocery shopping almost every day. People would either go once a week or twice a week, something like that. Whereas in the Netherlands, it is not uncommon for people to go almost every day. And that is
It's crazy because over here we have grocery stores everywhere, but we still do our shops once a week because people can afford to go out once a week because they have work, right? So Saturday or Sunday they go grocery shopping. So we do it weekly, not daily. Yeah.
because there are so many supermarkets that it's pretty easy for you to just stop by one on your way from work to your house. And I don't mean having to go way out of your way to do that. No, I mean it's basically on your way. And it kind of almost
Even
doesn't
though we
matter where you
don't.
live or work unless you live on a farm. You pretty much can expect that there will be a supermarket that is sort of conveniently on your way home. This is so normal to me here now that I almost find it hard to imagine having to drive to the supermarket. And driving there not because you're trying to buy too many groceries at once, but because you kind of don't have a choice. So if you need to run out to grab a pack of milk, in my case, oat milk, in the Netherlands that takes me about a 5-minute walk, whereas in the US that's easily a 5-minute drive if you're lucky. Now, staying on the topic of non-luxury things that you can expect to find in your neighborhood here in the Netherlands, we're going to talk about bakeries. In the US, if there is a bakery nearby, then that's considered a luxury. Even more of a luxury if that bakery is a little bit affordable, but that's typically not the case. Now, here in the Netherlands, the bakeries are way more affordable than what I was used to back in the US. They're still, of course, more expensive than if you were to get those same goods at a
Bakery.
supermarket, but first of all, they're abundant. In basically every neighborhood, you can also find a local bakery. Similarly, another item that would be considered a luxury in the US is cheese, whereas this is the Netherlands, and you have good cheese in the US. But if you are trying to get good cheese, then that is going to cost you, and it's also not as easily accessible. Whereas here in the Netherlands, basically in the supermarkets or just in cheese shops that you also just have, you will find cheese that is good and affordable. But in the US, you're paying, I don't know, $10 for a piece of cheese. And if you think that's an exaggeration or that sounds like a lot, just know that it's probably more now. Thanks, inflation. Now, the next item on the list is how easily one can travel to other countries when you live in the Netherlands. And this is definitely a luxury in the US.
Mm.
So, I want to elaborate a bit more on this topic, but first, I love traveling to other countries, and I know that you do too. So, I have a great tip for you for the next time you go traveling. I want to take a moment to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, Saily. Saily is an eSIM that's brought to you by NordVPN. Now, for those of you not familiar, now a traditional physical SIM, I think the last time I got a physical sim.com/Americano to check it out.
Yeah, so far cheese and traveling to close by places is a luxury. So those two I can say for here It is definitely luxury. Like you don't normally see cheese in people's house. We do have our own local cheeses, but they're not like cheese. They're just like a watered down cheese tasting something. Okay. Something. I don't even know what to call it, to be honest, but it's not cheese.
Okay, so as I was telling you, in the Netherlands, it is pretty easy to travel to other countries. And the first time here that someone told me that they went to Paris for the weekend, my jaw literally dropped to the floor. What do you mean Paris for the weekend? Who does that? I thought this person was super fancy schmancy. So I went home and told my Dutch wife, then girlfriend, about this, because it was a couple of years ago. And she was like, honey, how do I break this to you? Paris is like 4 hours away on the train. It is not that unusual for someone to go to Paris on the weekend. If you
You
are
want to
Dutch or
do
even
that?
European and watching this, I don't think you understand what kind of a flex this is in America to say that you went to Paris, a whole other country, for the weekend. We don't do that in America. We can't. Okay, but cut to present day, and now where I work, I even have coworkers who come from Belgium because that's where they live and they work in the
Mm.
Netherlands like I do. And that is becoming less and less unusual for me. And now that I've lived here a couple of years, I have also taken advantage of this fact that you can travel easily between the Netherlands and other neighboring countries. So just this year, I went to Paris twice, also for like a long weekend. So yeah, if I feel like a Parisian croissant one of these days, I will just get myself on that train and go to Paris and get myself a croissant.
Croissant.
Or croissant. I don't know why I said that. I don't actually speak French, so I don't know if that was correct. But I try. I try. Okay, now let's talk about a few things around the house that is pretty common in the Netherlands. Like, I've seen very many people who have these items that I'm going to be talking to you about, and they seem really commonplace. Whereas in America, you would be a fancy schmancy individual if you had any of these items. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is this bathroom rack to warm up your towel. I can't remember ever having seen this in the US, maybe at a fancy hotel, but in the Netherlands, this is just normal. You have this in your bathroom, and people really use it to have their towels nice and dry and warm. So that was surprising to me when I
I
moved
want
here.
one.
And this other item are these windows that you can open here sort of halfway. So you kind of can open them all the way, but you can also like adjust them to a setting that you can open them sort of halfway to like air out the room,
Cool.
because airing out your room for een beetje frisse lucht is so important to Dutch people. So imagine if they didn't have windows that allowed you to do that. In the US, I feel like this would be considered fancy.
I think I've already showed you, but our windows have mostly, you will have a lot of bars. I'll try to edit out the video so you can see. So you will see like a window, but then inside there is like bars. You see that? Because of theft. Okay. So we have this because of theft. It looks like jail, yes, but it's for theft, right? So if we have like windows like that, here in the Philippines, it will get broken into a lot of times. So that's why we put bars because it's very unlikely they will have time to kind of like cut through it and nobody notices, right? So that's why our windows we usually look like this. We have windows that are like the sliding ones that are glass, but it's like it's strategically placed where nobody can climb or nobody can like access. So you might see that here and there, or maybe in modern houses, it's more of the glass windows, um, especially in neighborhoods that have security and all that stuff. But if you are like in neighborhoods that don't have security, then you will find windows like this. Yeah.
Because this seems like an exclusive feature on your windows. But again, this is something that's more or less standard here in the Netherlands. I've also seen doors that can do that, by the way, and I don't know how common that is, but it exists. And another thing that I've seen in people's homes that I think is also pretty standard, like you can do this at IKEA, and in the US, you would again be a fancy schmancy
Fancy.
individual if you had this, or at least it's considered a more fancier option, which is having a built-in refrigerator in your kitchen. Like here in the Netherlands, people just have this. Like I said, you can go get your kitchen made at IKEA, and that's just one of the options. Very many people have it. Like
Interesting.
cheap kitchens that are put into, cheap rental apartments. will also have this, which I found really surprising because, as I said, in the US, this is considered a fancier option. So I will be ending this video with a few big ticket items, but before I do that, I wanted to talk to you about one medium-sized item, which is public parks. Here in the Netherlands, if you live in a big city even, it is pretty common to have a public park not too far away. And I'm not talking about basketball courts and concrete everywhere. I'm talking about luscious green parks. In the US, I mentioned the basketball courts. You will have some sort of like play area. That's kind of common, like a playground, but for like older kids or adults, so like a basketball court or something like that. You might have a few of those in the city, but when I'm talking about like actual parks, you don't have that as much in America as you do here. And if you did in America, then that would be considered a, again, perk or plus of a neighborhood. Whereas here in the Netherlands, that's pretty common, and I know that they want to build on this even more. If you live in a city like Amsterdam, I find that there are very many parks there, and it is like green and luscious, but Dutch people consider this such a basic necessity that they want to up their game in this regard. So I'm excited to see how many more green, luscious spaces show up here in Dutch cities. Alright, now let's talk about those big ticket items that I promised. And I always find it difficult to talk about these topics, even though I've mentioned them very many times in my videos. But I'm going to do it anyway because they're absolutely very, very important, especially when you talk about something like this. Things that are normal in the Netherlands that would be considered a luxury in the US. And it is with great pain and sorrow in my heart that I say that affordable healthcare is normal in the Netherlands, and in America, it's definitely a luxury. So in America, if you are someone with great insurance through your job, you are one of the lucky ones. And in the Netherlands, that is just not the case. The standard health insurance here in the Netherlands will be considered a luxury in America. And of course, I don't need to tell you about the fact that if you get into an emergency accident and need to get into an ambulance or go to the hospital in America, that could pretty much bankrupt you. So what a luxury if that doesn't happen to you in the Netherlands. The next thing I wanted to mention is paid parental leave. In the Netherlands, every individual who has a child gets paid parental leave. That is considered standard and commonplace. You do not just get paid parental leave if your employer is a fancy employer that gives you fancy paid parental leave. This is a legal requirement. In America, until recently, you didn't even have unpaid parental leave. So now you have some unpaid parental leave in America, but here in the Netherlands, it's paid. And the Netherlands actually doesn't have amazing parental leave when you compare it to other countries in Europe, especially when you're talking about the birth parent. But still, in America, you're kind of expected to work right up to the point that you give birth. Like, I'm not kidding. I've seen very many women, countless women, work with huge pregnant bellies, and I seriously don't know how they did it. Like, they're super women. Here in the Netherlands, you are actually required to take 4 weeks before you give birth off, and that is paid. You can take up to 6 weeks of leave before you give birth. So it's pretty nice that you have a little bit of time before you give birth. Also physically, like, I never thought about this until my wife was pregnant, but oh my god, being pregnant is really hard on your body. Like, of course I knew that in some abstract way, but when you see it up close, it is really shocking to me now that I just knew all of these women who worked while they were pregnant, you know, standing on their feet all day, and they could go into labor any minute. That's wild. And the final thing I would like to mention is plenty of paid vacation days and also unlimited sick leave. In the US, again, you could work at a fancy company that has a pretty good plan for holidays, but sometimes they have an unlimited number of holiday days that you can take, and people working there actually don't end up taking very much because they're still then competing with their peers, and then if your colleague you work with, if they take less holiday days, then you don't want to be the slacker that takes
I don't
more
care. I'll
holiday
take
days.
all
So
the holidays
it's
I
very
can.
much in the culture to not do that. Whereas here in the Netherlands, people are required to have a minimum of 20 days of paid vacation. And I think in the US, that's already quite high. But in the Netherlands, that would be considered the bare minimum. Like, I don't know anyone who has just 20 days. Most people have more than that. Okay, and maybe saying unlimited sick leave is a bit misleading, but for up to 2 years in Netherlands, you could be sick. So if you get a burnout here, for instance, you could have like a longer term leave. But in the US, you have something called sick days. So if you're sick, you need to call in and use one of your sick days, and you start off a year with a set number
Same.
of sick days. Here in the Netherlands, you have a bad migraine, you can call your boss and be like, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be productive at work today. And that is not the same as taking a sick day, because let's just say you catch something and you're sick, I don't know, every other week. You could do that here in the Netherlands. People aren't thinking about how many days they have to budget for being sick each time they get sick. People just call in sick when they're not feeling well and they feel like they're not going to be productive at work. This is so different in America that I think because you don't have sick days here in the Netherlands, I feel like informally from what I've heard from Americans who've moved here, that they have trouble actually calling in sick because they're like, I don't have any set number of days. Like, when am I sick enough to call in sick? And I know from my personal experience that I had
Mm.
to wait for the first year, year and a half at my job at a Dutch company to see what my colleagues did, my Dutch colleagues. And then afterwards, I was like, okay, I think I understand how it works. And also, my manager doesn't seem to be getting angry at them. So I can just call in sick when I am actually sick. And I do that now, and it is fantastic. It is not a luxury, it is just something that is standard and commonplace. So, those are some things I wanted to share with you on this topic today. As usual, I'm curious to hear about your experiences, and if I left anything out that you find important, please let me know. And as usual, until next time, doei!
Okay, that's good because what do you mean I only have the set amount of sick days in a year? What if I'm actually really sick and I need more days? Yes, you might have to take away from your leave or no pay. But at the same time, like, that's so stupid. I know some people will take advantage of that. Yes, it happens. Maybe that's why companies do that. In the Philippines too, we are like American. We follow the 10 days sick leave. I think it depends where you're working, but I think back in the days, uh in my place of work before, it was 10 days sick leave, and then we will have like 15 days paid off only in a year. Yes, so of course people do 15 days plus the 10 days sick leave, so that's 25 days. um Sick leave, if I'm not mistaken, in that company was not paid. The only paid leave was the 15 days. And then you can take a maximum of 25 leave that is unpaid. So if you go beyond that, then I guess you go to HR and be like, why you blah blah blah. But anyways, yeah, that's how I remember it to be, at least here. And I feel like the reason that we have a little amount of leave only is because we have a lot of holidays in the Philippines. Yeah, we have a lot of holidays. Obviously the holidays are not paid, so makes sense, I guess. Well, let me know how it works in your country. Thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you in our next video. Bye.